Support for independence, if you believe the polls, is pretty well 50-50 if Brexit indeed goes ahead, with tens of thousands marching in Edinburgh yesterday demanding another independence referendum. The dilemma for the leaders of the SNP, whose activists get together here in Glasgow over the next couple of days, is when to push for another vote. Well, the party's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, is with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Gordon.
Well, Luke, listening to Nicola Sturgeon, if I were one of the people out on that march yesterday, or indeed one of the people at your conference, one of the delegates who wants another independence referendum, I'm not sure the SNP's got much to say to me at the moment.
Well, I think all of us want to see an independent Scotland. We want to be able to rescue ourselves from the chaos that is Brexit, to make sure that Scotland can be a destination in Europe, one where we can deliver on the aspirations of the people of Scotland on growth and, of course, delivering a fairer society. But I think the message is that we need to get through the Brexit process. We need to know where the UK is going to end up, and that will allow us to have an informed discussion as to what the options are for the people of Scotland at that point. I welcome the fact that there were tens of thousands, 100,000 people, many say, marching in Edinburgh yesterday. And the First Minister at our last conference made the point that we need to have the discussion on the why of independence, have a discussion about the vision that we have about creating a better society. And then when we know what is going to happen...
But you haven't done that yet.
Well, and I would argue that that's what's happening. And as I've gone around my constituency, we've been on recess for the last 3 weeks.
But hang on. Again, if I were one of those people in this march listening to this, I'd be thinking, I'm sorry, this is just waffle. I want another independence referendum.
I think one of the things that we have said is that we need to let the Brexit process take its course, because we need to know what kind of situation...
But you've said, haven't you, that unless a Brexit deal turns out to be what you've been asking for, which is staying in the single market and staying in the customs union, which is not going to happen, your MPs will vote against it, right?
Well, I'm not quite sure that that's not going to happen. I have argued that there is a majority in the House of Commons for staying in the single market and the customs union. The first responsibility that we have got is to limit the damage to Scotland from Brexit.
But again, just to be clear, you're not saying the SNP MPs will vote against a Brexit deal?
What I'm saying is that if Theresa May cannot protect her economic interests, because this is about jobs, it's about people, it's about prosperity, if we cannot stay in the single market and the customs union, then I'm making it very clear today that SNP MPs will go through the lobby and will vote against the government. We are not prepared to support
But if there is a
plans.
deal which involves staying in the single market and the customs union, you'll vote for it?
Well, what we have said is these are our red lines. The Scottish Government has issued 2 papers on Scotland's place in Europe. We want to limit the damage from Brexit. We want to see the UK stay in the single market.
But given you can explain to me very clearly there what your red lines are, why can't you say, if we don't get those red lines, we'll have another independence referendum? That's what the marchers want to know.
Because what the First Minister has said, and I absolutely fully agree with her, is that once we know what is going to happen with Brexit, we will have an informed discussion on where we are at that point. I'm gratified to see the rise in support for independence. But you've just told us where we are.
You've just told us that unless we stay in the single market and the customs union, you'll vote against it.
There has to be a process. Let events take their course, and then we can have that discussion about where we stand and what the opportunities are. I'm ambitious for Scotland. I'm ambitious for an independent
Will there
Scotland.
be another independence referendum before 2021?
Well, look, I am not going to put a timescale on that today. We will come back to that once we know the Brexit process, and you'll be the first to hear as to what we're going to do at that point. When it is right to call a referendum, then, of course, we will do so.
Now, you are now, apparently, if we're to take what Nicola Sturgeon was just saying at face value, you're now in favour of another Brexit referendum? No,
what we are saying is that if it's a proposition for a people's vote, that we would, of course, not obstruct that. But there's a very important...
Nicola Sturgeon said that SNP MPs, if there was such a proposition, would vote for it in the House of Commons.
We will not obstruct it. But the point that Nicola made, and I want to make as well, let me be absolutely clear on this, that prior to the last referendum, we made the point that Scotland should not be dragged out of the EU against its will.
Yes, but Nicola Sturgeon didn't say that you would only vote for another Brexit referendum if in advance you got some deal on a referendum for independence. She just said you'd vote for it.
Neither am I saying that either. But what I will say is if there is to be a people's vote, there will have to be legislation in the House of Commons to allow that to happen. And what we'll be seeking to do at that point is to make sure that we protect Scotland's interests. We don't want to be in the situation, as the First Minister has said, that if the UK as an entity votes to come out again and Scotland votes very strongly to remain, as I suspect, then we have out of that to make make sure that we can protect Scotland's position.
Right, but you're not making that a condition.
Well, that's a point we'll be making clear, and I'll be seeking to get the support of others that are arguing for a people's vote to make sure that is enshrined.
If I am one of the people in Labour or even the Conservatives who wants another vote on Brexit, I'll be thinking, oh, that's great. I thought they were going to make a big fuss about having all sorts of conditions and we'd have to agree to another independence referendum, but they've given up on that.
I think it's self-evident that if the UK continues to march off the edge of the cliff, come out of Europe, not to have that protection of the single market and the customs union, we have an obligation to protect the interests of the people of Scotland. Now, of course, what I would say to you...
that means voting for another referendum.
Well, but what I would say to you is let's not forget that the Scottish Government was re-elected in 2016 with a mandate that if there's a material change in circumstances, we can call a referendum. It's about the circumstances that would lead to that happen. But we're doing things on a step-by-step basis. And it may well be that allowing to have a people's vote is a mechanism that we could support as part of that process.
Some of the people who are, I mean, obviously there are many people out marching yesterday, want another independence referendum. Some MSPs and indeed MPs have been expressing their views on the subject, and indeed a former SNP presiding officer on RT, on the programme that Alex Salmond hosts on Russian television. In early September, you said, I certainly wouldn't encourage people to be seen on RT. I've made it clear that I don't believe that people should broadcast on RT. What do you make of the fact that just this week they are kind of just ignoring you?
Well, look, it's up to each individual to make their own decisions as to whether or not...
But is there a case for a bit of party discipline here?
Well, look, no, I mean, we're talking about people that are adults and they can make their own minds up. I personally do not think it's appropriate. But
you say they're adults, but to have elected members, some of them, of the SNP on RT implicitly criticising the policy of the SNP government in Edinburgh. I mean, irrespective of whether they're adults and they can make their own decisions, fine. That looks terrible.
We face a situation that we know that there has been a terrorist attack on the streets of the United Kingdom. We know the involvement of the Russian state with the attack that took place in Salisbury. We know that RT is effectively a tool of the Russian state. I think people should reflect very carefully before they appear on that programme.
But will you tell someone like Angus MacNeil, don't go on that? I'm your party leader. I'm telling you, just don't go on it. It looks awful.
I have made it clear that I don't think it is appropriate for our parliamentarians to appear on RT.
But you won't go further than that?
Well, I've made it clear that I don't think it's appropriate, and I would leave it at that for the time being.
What is the status of Andrew Wilson's report?
Well, I think Andrew's produced a report which has resulted in informed debate that has happened in the SNP.
Is it ever going to be SNP policy?
Well, we've had 3 debates at National Assembly. Keith Brown, our deputy leader, has responsibility of taking that process forward. When you look at the hundreds of people that have turned up at these meetings...
Fine, but is it ever going to be SNP policy?
Well, what will happen is that there will be resolutions that will come forward in due course to SNP national conferences. It's about having that debate about how we can deliver a fairer, more prosperous Scotland. Now, for example, one of the things that has come out of the Growth Commission is a suggestion that we have a standing commission on infrastructure investment. That is something that the SNP's taken up
I'm sure
today.
that's fine,
so
but if I were to ask you a very basic question, as leader of the SNP parliamentary group at Westminster, can you tell me what currency an independent Scotland would have? Would you be able to answer the question?
Well, what we have said is if we are going to come forward with a proposition for a referendum, then we will answer those questions. The Growth Commission, I think, has made a very sensible suggestion that we retain...
You see, coming back to all those marchers and to people at your conference who just want independence, this is all... waffle. I mean,
well, it's not,
your answer to the question, when can we have another independence referendum, is I don't really know. And your answer to the question of what, at least in an economic sense, is independence for, is I don't know that either.
No, that's not quite the case. If you let me answer the question. This is a democratic party. The Growth Commission has published a report, and there's now a process of engagement which is taking place within the party. That will result in a set of proposals that will be put forward to the Scottish people. I actually think what the Growth Commission has come up with on currency is very sensible, that we retain the pound sterling.
But it's not SNP policy?
Well, not at the moment, because there's a debate and there's a process which is taking place. But I come back to the point.
I mean, you've got tens of thousands of people out in the street saying, we want independence. And you're sitting here saying, I don't really. Well, we've got great ideas on what an independent Scotland would look like, but I can't actually say what its currency would be.
Well, no, look,
and I can't actually tell you when we'll have an independence
I
referendum.
think on this one, you're actually being a bit unfair, because it's a Democratic Party. The Growth Commission has come forward with a set of proposals, 50 proposals that they've come forward with. Currency is one of those. The party is now debating that. We will have a very clear proposition that we will put to the people of Scotland when a referendum is called.
Okay,
and we will answer specifically.
Very lastly,
that
one
question.
sentence. What would you say if there are people in the Yes movement who think, look, the SNP just aren't delivering for us? Let's set up something else.
I think the SNP have been delivering for the people of Scotland, and you can look at the achievements of the Scottish Government over the course of the last few years. Look, there are polls out today that show the SNP is 20 points ahead of our nearest opponent. Okay. I think the Scottish people are continuing to put the trust in the Scottish National Party.
Ian Blackford, Luke, thanks very much indeed for coming on this morning.